There's a specific kind of humiliation that hits different, the kind where you're not just being laughed at, you're being filed away in someone else's head as less than, like you're an inconvenience that learned to speak. Jalan Pulang sang Pewaris opens with that exact sting, and I'm not gonna lie, it got under my skin fast. And yes, you're on Bongo Gaming with me, and if you like drama reviews that actually have a pulse, hit subscribe, no pressure, just helps the channel breathe. Also, I'm going full spoilers in the sense that I'll talk about the whole arc as the show presents it, but I'm not here to invent twists the story never earned, so if you haven't watched yet, consider this your, you might wanna pause me, moment. What pulled me in isn't even the money stuff at first. It's the posture. Amelia, the lost heiress with no memory, stuck living the life of a poor girl who's constantly being reminded of her place, carries herself like someone who's been told no 1,000 times and has learned to make no sound negotiable. She doesn't have that glossy, scripted resilience where the character gets insulted and then a motivational soundtrack plays and suddenly she's fine. No. When she's shamed, you see it land. Her eyes change. Her shoulders tighten for half a second like her body is trying to protect her heart. And then she chooses, very deliberately, how to respond. And the show is smart enough to understand that humiliation isn't only about words. It's about the environment. Christmas lights, cheerful crowds, the whole world pretending it's warm, and Amelia's out here selling hand-knitted scarves like each one is a little piece of her dignity she's trying to exchange for survival. That's such a simple setup, but it's emotionally loaded. Because a scarf is intimate. Someone's hands made it. It's soft. It takes time. Which means when someone sneers at it, they are not just mocking a product. They are mocking the hours of somebody's life. Now, the friend who humiliates her, let's be real, that is not a friend, that is a socially acceptable bully with better packaging, goes straight for the jugular, background, family, worth. The kind of insult people throw when they think poverty is a personality flaw. And Amelia's reaction is what makes the scene work. She doesn't collapse into a puddle of tears for the camera. She stands there, blinking like she's recalibrating her faith in humanity, and you can almost hear her thinking, so this is who you are. But then the drama does something I actually appreciated, it doesn't let the world be only cruel. A good person comes in and buys all her scarves. And I know, on paper that sounds like a fairy tale bandage. The mysterious kind stranger trope can be cheap if it's played like Destiny handing the heroine a coupon code. Yet here, it feels less like a miracle and more like a reminder. Like, okay, not everyone is trash. And that matters, because the show is about to put Amelia through the grinder. You need those tiny proof-of-life moments to keep the story from becoming misery tourism. Here's the question the show quietly asks in that early stretch: what does it do to a person when survival becomes their full-time job, and kindness is rare enough to feel suspicious? Because right when you're letting yourself exhale, the housing situation detonates. The landlord decides to raise the rent illegally, just casually, like extortion is a seasonal hobby, and the threat isn't abstract. It's immediate. You and your mother could be thrown out. And I really want to talk about the mother here, because this is where Jalan Pulang sang Pewaris starts showing its teeth. The mom isn't written as a saintly prop who exists only to suffer prettily and motivate the lead. She's proud. She's tired. She's the kind of woman who has stretched one coin into 5 meals so many times it's basically a magic trick, and she doesn't want to be pitied. Then she gets injured. And that injury is such a cruel narrative lever because it doesn't just add medical stakes, it collapses the whole fragile budget of their life. No work means no money means the landlord suddenly has a moral excuse to treat them like disposable clutter. The show doesn't need to scream, "Capitalism bad," with a neon sign. It just shows you how quickly the world punishes you for being broke and unlucky at the same time. Amelia, of course, goes into overdrive. She sells what she can, she pushes herself, she tries to turn that Christmas scarf moment into a sustainable hustle. And the detail that hit me hardest, because it's so heartbreakingly human, is when she gives her mom a gift from the heart. Not some expensive miracle item. Something small but chosen. The kind of gift you give when you don't have money, so you give intention instead. And if you've ever been poor, or even just lived through a time when money was tight, you know exactly what that means. It's not about the object. It's about saying, I see you. I'm still here. We're still a family. And then Amelia does the thing that makes me both admire her and want to grab her by the shoulders. She decides she'll use her school money to treat her mother. That's the kind of choice that feels noble in dramas and devastating in real life. Because you're watching a young person trade their future for the present, and it's not because they are irresponsible. It's because the world left them no clean options. Her mother refuses at first, again, that pride, that maternal instinct to protect the child's future even when your body is failing you. But the refusal doesn't last, because pain has a way of making ideals feel expensive. Eventually she agrees to go to the hospital, and Amelia promises she'll earn her tuition herself. That promise is such a classic drama vow, but it lands because of how impossible it is. Like, sure. You'll just earn tuition. While also paying rent. While also being emotionally 17 inside. Great plan, sweetheart. No notes. The desperation is the point. And right when the story has you locked into this grounded, street-level survival narrative, it whips the camera upward into the skyscraper world. Helen Clark, the so-called Iron Lady of Law, the owner of the biggest law firm in the world, drops a $50 million reward to find her missing daughter, Amelia. $50 million. That number is so intentionally obscene compared to the, how do we pay rent this month, panic we were just living in. It's meant to make you feel sick. Because the solution to Amelia's suffering exists, it's just trapped behind identity, memory, and power. Let me say something slightly contrarian here, because I can already hear the usual take, rich people drama, a lost heiress, how predictable. And yes, lost heiress stories are basically their own genre at this point. But I actually think this show uses the trope for something more pointed than fantasy. The amnesia isn't just a plot device to delay the reunion. It's a social experiment. Amelia is literally the same person, and yet the world treats her like she has a different soul because she doesn't have the right last name attached to her. The show isn't asking, what if a rich girl became poor? It's asking, what if the only thing keeping you safe was information? So now you've got two engines running at once, Amelia trying to survive and protect her mom, and Helen Clark launching what is basically a global manhunt with a legal budget. And somewhere in the middle of that, the father enters like a storm. There's this thread in the storyline that I found weirdly gripping. At one point, Amelia is publicly humiliated again, this time it's more direct confrontation energy, and her father suddenly appears to protect her. And the way it's described, is pleading with Miss Clark not to fire him, while someone else is already contacting Team Jersey, like backup is being summoned. That's such a dramatic, almost soap operatic beat, and normally I'd roll my eyes, but here's why it works. It hints that Amelia's father has been living in the Clark orbit, possibly as staff, possibly as someone who lost his place and is clawing it back. It paints him as a man whose loyalty has cost him, a man who doesn't have the luxury to be proud. And I'm telling you, the father's role is the emotional cheat code of this whole drama. Because when you watch a young woman get crushed by life, you're already sad. But when you add a parent who finally finds her, late, breathless, full of regret, trying to protect her now like protection can rewrite the past, that hits a different nerve. That's the kind of thing that makes you stare at the screen a little too quietly. What keeps it from becoming pure melodrama is that Amelia isn't written as a passive rescued princess. Even with no memory, she's sharp. She starts building an illegal eviction case against Green Estate. And I love that detail because it ties her identity back to the Helen Clark world without making it magical. Law isn't in her blood as a superpower, it's in her instincts as a person who can't tolerate injustice. She's learned, through pain, how systems hurt people. So she turns that pain into a case. But of course, the show understands a brutal truth: sometimes the villains aren't just landlords and corporations. Sometimes they're your co-workers. Enter John, at least, the co-worker figure in the story who wants to take credit for Amelia's work and pressure her for her savings. This is where the drama starts to feel painfully modern, because it's not the cartoon, evil co-worker twirling mustache. It's that specific breed of opportunist who smiles while stealing your oxygen. The kind of person who uses teamwork language as a weapon. "We're in this together," he says, while quietly moving your name off the document. I'm gonna pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had someone try to rewrite your effort in real time? Like you're watching them steal your story and you can't even process it fast enough to fight back? Because that's the emotional flavor of this midsection. Amelia is fighting on too many fronts: the eviction, her mother's health, her own finances, and now professional betrayal. And this is where her amnesia becomes extra tragic. If she remembered who she was, she might have boundaries. She might have confidence. She might know how to throw power around. But as Amelia the poor girl, she's constantly second-guessing what she deserves, which makes her an easy target. And then the drama adds another knife: the fiancé. There's a line in the storyline that Amelia is being deceived by her prospective husband, who wants to take her wedding savings. And I have to give the show credit for making this deception feel like an extension of the same theme. Because it's not random. It's consistent. People see Amelia as a resource. A wallet. A labor machine. A convenient heart to exploit. And the fiancé scam works not because Amelia is stupid, but because she's starved for stability. She wants something steady. She wants a life where she can stop bracing for impact. This is also where I got unexpectedly emotional, and I'll just say it plainly: watching Amelia try to be strong all the time made me tired. Like, in my body. Because the show captures that specific exhaustion of being the capable one. The one who always figures it out. The one who can't fall apart, because if you fall apart, everything collapses. There was a moment, more of a mood that repeats, where Amelia is clearly holding tears back, not because she isn't hurting, but because she can't afford the time it takes to cry. And I've been that person. Not with an illegal eviction case, thank God, but with life. With bills. With family. With that quiet panic of, if I don't handle it, nobody will. So yeah. That got me. Now, let's talk about Helen Clark for a second, because characters like this can easily become caricatures: the icy corporate mother, the Iron Lady, the woman who replaced emotion with achievement. But the reason Helen works, at least in this storyline's framing, is because her power is also her prison. She can offer $50 million to find her daughter, but she can't buy time. She can't buy back the years she lost. She can't purchase the version of Amelia who might have grown up safely with her identity intact. That reward is both a flex and a confession. It's Helen saying, I have everything, and I still couldn't protect the one thing that matters. And the father, who has just found a trace of Amelia in New York, becomes the bridge between these worlds. He learns she's tied up in risky clinical trials and the eviction case. And that combination is such a sinister cocktail: medical exploitation plus housing exploitation plus legal betrayal. It's like every system is taking a bite out of her at once. Okay, real quick, small self-aware aside, the moment you hear risky clinical trial in a drama, you already know the lighting is about to get colder and somebody is about to say consent form like it's a threat. I don't make the rules. But here's where the plot choice is actually doing something interesting. The clinical trial angle, handled responsibly, can symbolize what desperation does to the human body. When you're broken cornered, you don't just sell scarves. You sell time. You sell comfort. You sell safety. Sometimes you sell health. And the show placing Amelia in that situation, while her real family is literally wealthy enough to stop it with one phone call, is meant to make you furious. It's dramatic irony as emotional torture. And I know some viewers don't like being played like that. They'll say it's manipulative. But I'll defend it, carefully. Because the manipulation is the point. It's forcing you to sit in the gap between what should happen and what is happening. That gap is where the show lives. Now, does it always balance the pacing? Not perfectly. There are stretches where you can feel the drama stacking problems like it's building a Jenga tower of suffering. Eviction. Injury. Tuition. Betrayal. Fiancé scam. Clinical trial. Missing heiress reward. Father racing to New York. At a certain point you're like, okay, does Amelia also have to fight a bear behind a Walmart, or can we breathe? The story sometimes mistakes more for stronger. But when it hits, it hits. And the reason it hits is the character work underneath. Amelia's arc, as laid out here, isn't just, poor girl becomes rich again. A person learns what they are made of before the world hands them their name back. The amnesia makes her identity something she has to build from scratch. She becomes someone through action, by defending her mother, by standing up to humiliation, by pursuing justice against Green Estate, by refusing to let people steal her work or her money, at least, refusing once she realizes what's happening. And the father's arc, this is the one I'm watching closely, is basically a sprint fueled by guilt. He finds her trace and he rushes. That's his whole emotional language, movement. He's not the kind of man who sits and mourns, he runs toward the problem like if he arrives fast enough, he can erase the damage. Let me paint one moment the way it felt in my head when I watched it unfold, because the show thrives when it slows down and lets a scene breathe. Picture Amelia on a cold street in New York, holiday lights still up in some places, but the wind has teeth. Her hands are raw, not just from knitting but from life. She's holding paperwork, the kind that never looks dramatic until you realize it decides whether you sleep inside or outside. Her phone buzzes. Another message. Another demand. Someone asking for money she doesn't have. Someone pulling at her from another direction. She looks up at a building, could be the estate office, could be a clinic, could be a law office, glass and steel, bright inside, warm in that way money is warm. And the camera, at least in the way the drama wants you to feel it, keeps her small in the frame. Not because she is small, but because the world is towering over her. You hear traffic. You hear the muffled chatter of people who aren't scared. And she swallows, like she's pushing down panic, and she steps forward anyway. That's Amelia in one image, terrified, determined, and still moving. So when the father finally closes distance, when he's in the same city, chasing the same thread, it's not just plot. It's emotional convergence. It's the moment the story has been withholding. And it doesn't even need to be the reunion yet, the anticipation is enough. The knowledge that somewhere, very close, the person who could change everything is breathing the same air and doesn't know exactly where she is. And then we're back to the uglier human obstacles, John trying to steal credit, the fiancé trying to steal funds. And I want to be honest, this is where some viewers are going to start yelling at the screen. Because it can be frustrating watching Amelia get tricked repeatedly. The deception beats have to be paced carefully or the lead starts to look unrealistically naive. But I actually think the show has an out, and it's in the detail. Amelia is operating without a safety net. People who have never been protected are easier to con. That's not weakness, that's conditioning. When you grow up with stability, you learn what normal looks like. When you grow up in survival mode, you normalize red flags because at least they are familiar. So when a fiancé says, "Trust me," and she wants to trust him, it's not because she's dumb, it's because she's craving the feeling of not being alone. Still, I will criticize one thing, the story sometimes relies too heavily on Amelia doesn't know her worth as a mechanism to keep the plot going. And there's a thin line between portraying trauma and milking it. I felt that line wobble in places. There were moments where I wanted the script to let Amelia win a little earlier, just to vary the emotional rhythm. Not because I need the show to be easy, because I don't. I like pain when it's purposeful. But the show is at its best when Amelia's intelligence is allowed to land cleanly, not constantly interrupted by a new betrayal. But then, just as you're thinking, okay, we're stuck in the mud, the Helen Clark engine roars again. $50 million doesn't just motivate allies. It attracts predators. And that's something I hope viewers keep in mind while watching. A reward like that creates noise. It creates false leads. It creates opportunists. It turns Amelia into a commodity even in her absence. And when the father is chasing her trace through New York, you get the sense that he's not just racing time, he's racing the crowd that money attracts. So here's the next tension pivot that had me leaning forward. When the father shows up to protect her in public, is that protection going to save her, or expose her? Because the moment someone claims Amelia loudly, The world around her changes. People who didn't care before start caring for the wrong reasons. And in the middle of all this, there's the legal case against Green Estate, which is quietly one of the most interesting threads because it's the only place Amelia gets to fight back with structure instead of pure emotion. It's not just yelling at a landlord. It's building an argument. It's collecting proof. It's using the system against itself. Even when the system is stacked. That's why John trying to steal the credit for the case is so infuriating. Because it's not just theft of recognition. It's theft of agency. He's trying to take the one thing Amelia built with her own mind and turn it into his ladder. And I want to highlight something about stories like this: they are not really about rich vs poor. They're about visibility. When Amelia is poor, people look through her. When she becomes useful, either as a legal brain or as a potential payday, suddenly everyone can see her. That's the cruelty. The world sees you when it can extract something. One of my favorite emotional contradictions in the storyline is that Amelia is simultaneously being exploited and being sought. The Clarks are searching for her like she's priceless. The people around her are using her like she's disposable. And she's the same person in both scenarios. That contrast is the whole show. Now, performance-wise, because I know some of you watch these dramas for acting first, plot second, this story lives or dies on whether Amelia can sell inner pressure without turning it into constant tears. And based on how the storyline frames her, the role demands a lot: quiet dignity, sudden courage, moments of fear, moments of rage, the soft tenderness with her mother, the professional sharpness in the legal thread, and the crushed disappointment when men around her try to treat her like a piggy bank. The mother role also has to avoid being one note. If she's only suffering, you stop feeling it. But if she has pride, stubbornness, humor, even just little flashes, it makes the relationship feel like a real relationship, not a narrative device. And that relationship, for me, is the heart anchor early on. Even when the Clark Empire stuff escalates, I keep returning emotionally to the small room energy: Amelia and her mom, sharing silence, sharing worry, pretending they're okay because pretending is sometimes all you have. And can we talk about how the show uses Christmas? That setting is such a deliberate emotional trap. Christmas is supposed to be the season of family, belonging, warmth. So putting Amelia, literally a missing daughter, out there selling scarves and being mocked is brutal irony. It's the holiday as a spotlight: everybody else is celebrating connection while she's living disconnection. Also, the scarf choice is not accidental. Scarves are about warmth. They protect your neck, your throat, your voice. Amelia making scarves is like she's trying to manufacture protection for other people while she has none for herself. Okay, but what happens when the father finally gets close enough to intervene for real? What happens when Helen's $50 million hunt starts intersecting with Amelia's day-to-day life in a way she can't ignore? Because that's where the story starts sliding into its most addictive mode: collision course. The show has lined up all these forces: family power, corporate property abuse, intimate betrayal, professional theft, medical risk, and it's waiting for them to smash into each other. And I love that it isn't just a physical chase. It's also a moral chase. Amelia is chasing justice with her case against Green Estate. Her father is chasing redemption. Helen is chasing control, because let's be honest, a reward that big is also an attempt to control the narrative of loss. John is chasing status. The fiancé is chasing cash. Everyone is chasing something, and Amelia is the track they're all running on. There's a moment, more like a pattern, that I found quietly devastating. Amelia keeps promising things. She promises her mom she'll find money. She promises she'll handle school. She promises herself she'll be fine. And each promise is both love and denial. Love, because she genuinely wants to provide. Denial, because she's refusing to admit how impossible it is alone. The show understands how hope can become self-harm when you're the only one carrying it. And yes, there were times I wanted to reach into the screen and say, "Ask for help. Please." Just once. But then I remembered, for people like Amelia, asking for help has probably been punished before. People say yes and then they take something. Or they say no and you feel stupid for even hoping. So you stop asking. You just do. That's why the father's arrival matters so much. Not because a man is coming to save her, please, spare me that outdated fantasy, but because a parent showing up is the story finally offering Amelia the concept of being held. Not even rescued. Held. Supported. Seen without being used. And when you place that against the fiancé scam, it gets even darker. Because the fiancé is a parody of support. He's someone who pretends to offer safety while actively siphoning it away. The father is the opposite, someone who may have failed before, but is now trying to give safety back, even if it costs him his job, his pride, his life structure. And about that job detail, him begging Miss Clark not to fire him, there's something so raw about it. It suggests he's been punished, possibly demoted, maybe blamed for Amelia's disappearance, maybe stuck in a servant role in the Clark world. And yet even in that position, his first instinct is still to protect his daughter. That's love with a bruised ego. That's love that isn't pretty. If the show keeps that complexity, it's gold. If it simplifies him into hero dad, it loses something. Because the more interesting version is a man who messed up and knows it, a man whose love isn't clean, whose protection is desperate, whose redemption is still uncertain. Now let's step into the Green Estate thread a bit more, because this is where the drama can either become socially sharp or just decorative. Illegal eviction stories are powerful because they are not fictional to a lot of people. They are lived. And when a drama uses that kind of real-world threat, I'm always watching to see if it treats it like a costume or like a wound. From what the storyline gives us, Amelia is constructing a case, so we're not just watching victimhood, we're watching strategy. That matters. And it also makes John's betrayal feel more personal, because he isn't only taking credit, he's trying to take the justice itself. He wants the win without the risk. And risk is something Amelia has too much of already. Risk of losing housing. Risk of losing her mother. Risk of losing education. Risk of being medically exploited. Risk of being financially drained by someone she's supposed to marry. Risk of being erased professionally. And looming over all of it is the biggest risk of never reclaiming her identity. At some point, watching this, I had to laugh, just once, because the universe of this drama is so aggressively unfair to Amelia that it circles back to absurd. Like, if a bird stole her last $5, I wouldn't even blink. I'd just be like, of course. The bird works for Green Estate. But that laugh isn't mocking the show, it's a pressure release. The tension is that thick. Here's something else I loved, though, Amelia's defiance isn't loud all the time. She doesn't turn into a superhero. Her bravery is often quiet. It's in the decision to walk into an office that intimidates her. It's in the decision to look a richer person in the eye after being mocked. It's in the way she keeps showing up even when she's ashamed. And shame is the secret villain of the early to mid-arc. Poverty isn't just lack of money, it's being made to feel like you deserve less. The friend's insult at Christmas is shame. The landlord's illegal rent hike is shame dressed as policy. John's demand for her savings is shame through manipulation. The fiancé's deception is shame through intimacy, because when someone close to you exploits you, it leaves you wondering if you're the foolish one for trusting. So when the father finally finds her trace and rushes to New York, it's not just about reunion. It's about interrupting shame. It's about someone saying, no. You're not alone. You never should have been. But does Amelia even want to be found? That's the complicated part the drama can really play with. Because sometimes, when you've built a life, even a hard life, being found means losing the only identity you understand. It means stepping into a world that might not feel like yours. And when Helen Clark is involved, the world Amelia is stepping into is not gentle. It's legal empires and public scrutiny and power games. And Helen herself, this Iron Lady of Law, she's not just a mother with money. She's a force. If she finds Amelia, does she embrace her, or does she manage her? Does she apologize, or does she strategize? Does she see a daughter, or a legacy? That's the emotional bomb sitting under the whole premise. Because bringing her home could mean saving her or controlling her. And that's why I keep coming back to the title energy, Jalan Pulang sang Pewaris. The road home for an heir isn't just a physical return. It's an identity negotiation. It's the question of whether home is where you're from, or where you're safe, or where you're loved without being shaped into someone else. Now, since I'm doing full spoilers as much as the provided story allows, I can talk about where the show seems to be heading, the convergence of the eviction case and the Clark search. Amelia is unknowingly building legal ammunition that could either expose Green Estate publicly or pull her into bigger legal circles. John trying to take credit suggests that once this case gets attention, it becomes a ticket upward. The fiancé trying to steal her wedding savings suggests Amelia's personal life is being set up as another battlefield. And the clinical trial thread suggests Amelia's body is being put on the line while everyone else fights over paperwork and money. And the father, racing in, is the fuse. He's the one who can connect Amelia the struggling girl to Amelia the missing daughter in a way that makes the world snap into focus. One thing I'll praise the drama for, conceptually, is how it uses New York as an emotional symbol. Again, I'm not going to pretend I know every location shot, but the idea of New York in this story works. It's huge, indifferent, expensive, full of opportunity that's not evenly distributed. A lost heiress can disappear there. A poor girl can be swallowed there. And a powerful family can search there and still feel helpless. That's good thematic alignment. But I also want to keep it real. Sometimes these global biggest law firm setups get a little cartoonish if the writing doesn't ground them. Largest law firm in the world is a big claim, and if the show treats it like a shiny sticker rather than a living institution with politics, then Helen's world can feel like a stage set. The storyline hints at it being more than that, especially with the father pleading not to be fired, implying internal hierarchies and fear, but the execution matters. And if you're a newcomer watching, the emotional map you should track isn't who is rich, who is poor. It's who is loyal, and who is hungry. Hunger is the real villain here. Hunger for money, hunger for status, hunger for control, hunger for redemption. Amelia is hungry too, but hers is a hunger for stability and dignity. That's why you root for her. Let me linger on one of the most satisfying microbeats, Amelia daring to push back when she's being humiliated. That right there is the show's promise. It's telling you, yes, we will put her through it, but we won't make her a doormat. And that's important because a lot of these dramas accidentally slip into fetishizing suffering. Jalan Pulang sang Pewaris, at least in its core setup, is more about resistance than it is about pain. But resistance has a cost. When you resist, people notice you. When you resist, you become a threat. When you resist, the landlord doesn't just want rent, they want to put you in your place. When you resist at work, John doesn't just want credit, he wants to silence you. When you resist in a relationship, the fiancé doesn't just want money, he wants control. So when the father steps in publicly, protecting Amelia, it's a declaration. And declarations create enemies. The storyline mentions someone contacting Team Jersey, which I read as the show's way of signaling that the Clark world has enforcement, legal or physical, ready to mobilize. That detail adds adrenaline. It suggests that once the Clark machine activates, it doesn't move gently. It moves like a convoy. And I'm torn about that, emotionally. Because on one hand, yes, please, bring in the cavalry and save Amelia from the eviction nightmare and the clinic risk and the scams. On the other hand, when powerful systems mobilize, they tend to crush bystanders. Amelia's mother, Amelia's community, the tenants affected by Green Estate, what happens to them when the Clark machine rolls in? Do they get helped? Or do they get used as background noise while the heir is retrieved? If the show explores that, it becomes deeper than a lost daughter returns story. It becomes a story about who gets rescued and who gets left behind. And I'll tell you what I'm really waiting for, not even the reunion, not even the identity reveal. I'm waiting for Amelia to look at Helen Clark, this woman with all the money and power and reputation, and ask the simplest question, where were you? Not as a melodramatic scream. Just as a quiet, impossible question. Because money can't answer that. Alright, But before we get there, the drama keeps squeezing the middle: Amelia's legal case, John's betrayal, fiancé's deception, the hospital urgency, and the ticking clock of the clinical trial. And I want to talk about tension craft, because this is where a lot of dramas either get addictive or get exhausting. The addictive version is when every problem connects to a character choice. The exhausting version is when problems feel randomly assigned like tasks in a video game. This show flirts with both. When Amelia chooses to pursue the illegal eviction case, that's character-driven. When John tries to steal it, that's a believable consequence of ambition. When the fiancé targets the wedding savings, that's believable because Amelia is vulnerable and wants security. When the clinical trial risk appears, it can be believable if it's framed as desperation meeting exploitation. But if the show just stacks events without giving Amelia room to process, it risks turning her into a punching bag. And I think the reason I'm still on the show's side, why I lean more positive than negative overall, even with my critiques, is because Amelia's internal life is present in the storyline. She's not just running from plot to plot, she's reacting, choosing, promising, doubting, pushing back. And yeah, I'm invested. Because there's a particular kind of hope that only exists in stories like this, the hope that the world will finally match what a person deserves. That's why the missing heiress trope still works when it's done right. Not because we're all dreaming of being rich. Because we're dreaming of being safe. Of being seen. Of having one day where you don't have to beg for basic decency. And the father rushing to New York, him moving toward her, feels like the story moving toward that safety. But the show is too spicy to give it to us cleanly. Not with John and the fiancé and Green Estate and the clinic hovering like vultures. So the real suspense becomes, when the protection arrives, will it arrive in time, and will Amelia even recognize it as protection, or will it feel like another form of control? And that's where I'm going to stay for now, because the next stretch is where the story starts tightening all its threads at once, Amelia's case gaining weight, the people around her getting more desperate, and the father closing in on her location while the Clark search machine hums louder in the background, and Amelia, still without memory, still trying to be strong, takes one more step forward into a situation that feels like it could either save her or swallow her whole. And the situation she steps into has that familiar drama smell: fluorescent lights, too clean floors, paperwork slid across counters like it's a weapon, and people talking to her in that tone that says, "You should be grateful we're even letting you stand here." Amelia is trying to handle the eviction case like an adult, the hospital situation like a parent, and the fiancé situation like a person who still believes love is a real thing. And the show keeps framing her in these narrow spaces, hallways, cramped rooms, office corners, so you feel how little room she has to breathe. What I loved is that the directing doesn't always rush to underline her emotions. Sometimes it lets the silence do it. There's this recurring pause she does, like she's about to speak, then she rethinks the wording, not because she's timid, but because she's learned that the wrong word can cost you shelter. That's such a specific survival skill. People with power get to be blunt. People without it have to be precise. And right when you think, okay, she's at least getting traction with the Green Estate case, the story throws John back into her orbit like a mosquito that learned how to file documents. He's the kind of coworker who doesn't need to shout to be cruel. He just needs to imply. He implies Amelia doesn't understand how things work. He implies she'll ruin the case without his help. He implies she owes him because he guided her. And the show is very intentional about how he stands too close when he's pressuring her, invading her space in a way that's socially deniable. If you've ever dealt with a manipulator, you know that move. Close enough to intimidate, not close enough to be reportable. Here's the tension that made me keep watching even when my patience was thinning. When Amelia realizes she's being used, does she burn the whole bridge and risk the case, or does she play along and plan her counterstrike? Because Amelia's not naive in the way some people assume. She's inexperienced with protection, yes. But she's observant. The storyline already tells us she's capable enough to build an illegal eviction case. So the drama's challenge becomes, can it let her be smart without turning everyone around her into cartoon villains? And most of the time, it does. John isn't a demon. He's an opportunist with just enough charm to make you doubt your own anger. which is honestly worse. And then there's the fiancé thread, which for me is the most psychologically loaded one because it's intimate betrayal. Workplace betrayal hurts your pride. A fiancé trying to siphon wedding savings hurts your nervous system. It makes you question your instincts. It makes you question why you wanted love in the first place. The show plays that deception in a way that feels uncomfortably realistic. It's not always some dramatic, evil laugh moment. It's little nudges. Suggestions. Wouldn't it be easier if I held on to the money? I'm just trying to help you budget. We're about to be a family. And Amelia, who is juggling hospitals and rent and legal filings, is exactly the kind of exhausted person who could be tempted to say, "Fine, take it, just handle something for once." That's how people get trapped, not by stupidity, but by fatigue. And I need to confess something here. Because watching this made me remember a version of myself I don't love admitting existed. I used to think I could outwork every problem. Like if I just stayed up later, tried harder, carried more, it would all balance out. And there's a point where that mindset stops being admirable and starts being a slow form of self-erasure. Amelia's storyline hits that nerve. She's so busy being strong that she's almost not allowed to be a person. Now, the mother-daughter scenes are the emotional oxygen tanks. Even when the plot is busy, those scenes ground it. There's a tenderness in the way Amelia gives her mother that heartfelt gift, again, small detail, huge impact. The show understands that poverty doesn't erase love. If anything, it makes love more intentional because you can't outsource care. You have to do it with your hands. But the mother's injury is also where the drama gets mean in a way that felt honest. When her mother can't collect the rent money, you see how quickly the outside world becomes predatory. The landlord raising rent illegally isn't just greed, it's a form of social violence that's so normalized people shrug at it. And the show doesn't let it be abstract. It ties it to a face, a door, a threat of, "Get out." That landlord thread is where I want to talk about the visuals a bit, because even in a relatively straightforward melodrama setup, the visual language matters. When we're in the tenant's space, everything is warmer but dimmer, lamps, worn fabrics, clutter that isn't messy, it's lived in. When we're in spaces of authority, green estate offices, clinics, firm-like environments, it's bright but cold, straight lines, glossy surfaces. The contrast is not subtle, but it doesn't have to be. It's speaking the show's theme in color and texture, comfort without security versus security without comfort. And then the Helen Clark side of the story is all steel. Even the title they give her, Iron Lady of Law, tells you she's not framed as soft. You can practically hear high heels on marble floors. And I know some viewers will immediately want to hate her because, rich powerful mom who lost her child, can read like negligence. But I'm going to push against the easy hatred a little. Not because I'm here to excuse her, but because I think the more interesting reading is that Helen's relationship to motherhood might be tangled up in the same systems she dominates. Law, reputation, control. If you live in that world long enough, you start believing love is something you manage, not something you feel. So when she offers $50 million, I don't read it purely as, money solves everything. I read it as Helen's native language. She's speaking in the only way she knows how to speak at full volume. And the tragedy is that Amelia can't hear it. Amelia is out there counting bills and swallowing pride, while her mother is calling the world with a megaphone made of money. Let me throw you a hook that kept needling me. When Amelia finally stands in front of Helen, is Helen going to recognize her emotionally, or only legally? Because finding a daughter is one thing. Knowing a daughter is another. And the drama seems very aware of that gap. Now, the father. The storyline sets him up as someone who has finally found a trace of Amelia in New York and is rushing to bring her home. And the show gives him this desperate momentum. He's not strolling into the plot. He's arriving like someone who has been living with a wound that never closed. And I love that his first big beat isn't a heroic speech. It's him pleading with Miss Clark not to fire him. That's humiliation mirrored. Amelia is humiliated for being poor. The father is humiliated for being disposable labor in a rich woman's world. Father and daughter, both bent under other people's power. And that parallel is why his protective instinct hits so hard. Because when he steps in to shield Amelia, it's not a clean, triumphant, dad saves the day moment. It's messy. It's urgent. It's a man trying to stand tall while still on his knees socially. The team jersey detail is one of those deliciously dramatic ingredients that tells you, okay, the Clark world has muscle. Whether it's legal muscle, security muscle, private investigators, whatever team jersey is in full context, it signals that the stakes are about to escalate beyond arguments and into action. And I'll be honest, I'm always a little skeptical of elite team stuff in dramas, because it can get cheesy fast. Like, suddenly we're in Mission Impossible and someone is whispering into an earpiece about a scarf vendor. But if the show uses it to comment on how the rich mobilize resources instantly, while the poor have to beg for a hospital appointment, then it works. It becomes thematic instead of gimmicky. And the pacing in this section is where editing choices can make or break it. When you're cutting between Amelia scraping together money for rent and Helen offering $50 million like it's pocket change, the rhythm has to sting. You want the viewer to feel whiplash. The best version is when each cut is an accusation. Look at this gap. Look at how absurd this is. The worst version is when it feels like two separate dramas stitched together. From the storyline structure, it's clearly meant to be a collision. The show's job is to make you feel that incoming crash. There's also a really interesting subtext in Amelia taking on the illegal eviction case while not knowing she's a legal titan's daughter. It suggests that her moral compass isn't inherited through privilege, it's forged through suffering. That's why I said earlier I don't think the heiress trope is automatically shallow here. Amelia's heir identity isn't the part that makes her worthy. Her choices are. And that's where my contrarian take deepens. I actually don't want Amelia's memory to come back too early. I know viewers love the catharsis of, she remembers everything and then destroys the villains with one phone call. I get it. It's satisfying. But it's also the most boring version of the story if it happens too soon. The whole emotional thesis of this drama is that Amelia is valuable even when nobody knows her name. So the longer the story can sit in that discomfort, watching her fight without the cheat code of privilege, the more it earns the eventual homecoming. But of course, there's a limit. You can't drag it forever without it turning into torture. The sweet spot is when Amelia has grown enough that when the power finally arrives, she doesn't dissolve into it. She negotiates with it. She sets terms. She becomes someone who can be rich without being owned by richness. Now let's talk about the clinical trial thread, because that's the one that adds a darker, more physical kind of suspense. Risky clinical trial can mean a lot of things, and I'm not going to invent specific medical twists that aren't provided. But the idea alone is potent. It implies Amelia is being pushed to put her body on the line, likely for money, likely out of desperation, while her real family's wealth sits out of reach behind a curtain of missing identity. And what makes that so brutal is the consent illusion. In these situations, you technically choose to participate, but the choice is coerced by circumstance. The show is playing with that moral discomfort. It asks, is it a choice if the alternative is homelessness or untreated illness in the family? There's a scene energy I can almost feel from this setup. Amelia in a clinic waiting room, those stiff chairs bolted to the floor, the air smelling like sanitizer and burnt coffee, a TV in the corner playing something cheerful that nobody is watching. She's holding a clipboard. The pen is cheap and doesn't write smoothly. Her thumb keeps rubbing the edge of the paper like she's trying to erase what she's about to sign. And around her, other people are waiting too, some calm, some desperate, all of them quiet in that way people get when they are trying to pretend their situation is normal. And you see Amelia's face, and it's not just fear. It's calculation. If I do this, I can pay the hospital. If I do this, I can buy time. That's not heroism. That's triage. Here's a rehook that matters. What happens when the father finds her right as she's about to sign something she can't take back? Because that's the kind of near-miss tension this story is built for. The father racing in isn't just, find my daughter. It's, stop the world from taking pieces of her before I get there. Meanwhile, the Green Estate case keeps simmering. And this is where I want to give the show credit for choosing a legal conflict that isn't glamorous. Illegal eviction is paperwork, intimidation, bureaucracy. It's not flashy. But it's deeply cinematic when done right because it's a battle over something primal: home. A door. A key. A bed. A place where you can close your eyes without being watched. Amelia building that case also gives us a chance to see her competence in a setting where competence is often reserved for wealthy characters. She's not swinging a handbag into someone's face. She's researching, assembling, confronting. That's a different kind of power, and it makes her feel earned. John trying to take credit is the show reminding us that exploitation isn't only top-down. Sometimes it's lateral. Poor people can exploit other poor people. Struggling people can step on each other for a ladder rung. It's ugly, but it's real. And honestly, I appreciated that the show doesn't pretend solidarity is automatic. It shows how scarcity can rot relationships. The fiancé scam does something similar. It shows how love can be weaponized when someone senses vulnerability. The fiancé doesn't even have to be a mustache-twirling villain. He just has to be selfish enough to see Amelia's savings as available. And if the show handles it with nuance, it'll show how Amelia's longing for stability makes her susceptible, and how her eventual realization becomes a turning point, not into bitterness, but into clarity. And I need to say this: if you're watching and you're yelling, "Why doesn't she just leave him?" remember that leaving costs money, time, energy, and emotional bandwidth. Amelia is already running on fumes. The show is quietly arguing that exploitation thrives when people are exhausted. Now, the moment the father appears to protect Amelia in public, this is one of the headline beats in the storyline, and it's also where performance and blocking would matter most. Because this kind of scene can either feel like melodrama theater or it can feel like a gut punch. In the version that works, Amelia is mid-argument, mid-humiliation, maybe being threatened with eviction or being belittled in some official space. Her voice is steady but thin. She's trying not to cry. The crowd around her is doing that crowd thing where everyone pretends they are not watching, but they are absolutely watching. And then the father steps in, not with a speech, but with his body. He places himself between her and the threat. His shoulders are tense. His hands might shake slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline and rage he's trying to control. He doesn't even need to say, "That's my daughter," out loud for you to feel it. The protection is physical before it's verbal. And then, in the same breath, you get the twist of his own vulnerability, his begging Miss Clark not to fire him. That combination, protective father and pleading employee, is such a powerful contrast. It makes him human. It makes him imperfect. It also makes you understand the Clark household dynamic without exposition. If he has to beg not to be fired, then Miss Clark holds his livelihood in her palm. Which means the Clark world is not just rich, it's hierarchical. The storyline also mentions other people quickly calling Team Jersey, which adds chaos. Phones come out. Someone steps aside, whispering into a device. Amelia is standing in the center of a moment she doesn't understand, and that's where the drama's irony hurts. She's the reason for the mobilization, but she's the only one who doesn't know why she matters to them. That's deliciously painful storytelling. And if the show does one thing well across these threads, it's that it keeps reminding you, Amelia's life is being decided in conversations she's not in. Landlords decide rent hikes. Co-workers decide credit. Fiancés decide entitlement to her savings. Corporate estates decide evictions. Powerful mothers decide search budgets. Teams get called. Plans get made. And Amelia is always playing catch-up, always reacting. So the big emotional pivot I want, what I'm waiting for like it's a meal I ordered an hour ago, is Amelia taking authorship. Not just resisting. Authoring. The moment she stops being the object of everyone's agenda and becomes the subject of her own story. And again, I don't need her to become cruel. I don't need her to suddenly talk like a CEO. I just need her to start choosing with full awareness. Even if the choice is messy. There's also something thematically rich in the idea that Amelia, without memory, is still drawn to law and justice. That's either nature, nurture, or narrative fate, but whichever it is, it makes her feel consistent. It suggests that even stripped of identity, she's still herself. Now, let's shift back to Helen Clark, because her side could easily become a one-note, boss lady, montage if the show isn't careful. But the storyline sets up a potentially complex grief. She's offering 50 million, which is both desperation and control. And I keep imagining the quieter moments the drama can give her if it's smart. Helen alone in an office after everyone leaves, the city lights behind her, her face finally not performing. Maybe her hand lingers on an old photo. Maybe she doesn't cry, because she's the kind of woman who doesn't do tears. But her throat tightens anyway. And she hates that. She hates that her body betrays her with feeling. And if the drama gives us that, Helen becomes more than a trope. She becomes a person who has built an empire to avoid helplessness, and motherhood made her helpless anyway. Here's another question that keeps the stakes high. When Helen finally gets Amelia back, does she apologize, or does she negotiate? Because powerful people often treat relationships like contracts. And if Helen is Iron Lady of Law, she might not know how to be a mother without writing terms in her head. The father's role in all this could become heartbreaking too, depending on what the show implies about his past. If he's been punished or marginalized in the Clark world, his love for Amelia is tangled with shame and longing. He might feel he has to earn his place in her life again. And watching a parent try to earn what should have been unconditional it's rough. It makes you want to look away, but you can't. Now, I'm going to talk about sound and music for a second, because dramas like this live and die by how they score suffering. If the music is too heavy-handed, it tells you what to feel and cheapens it. If it's restrained, it lets you feel it yourself and then hits harder. Based on the tone of the storyline, the best scoring choice is minimalism in the cruel moments. Let the sound of a door closing be the sting, let the hum of fluorescent lights be the dread, let the silence after an insult be the shame. Save the swelling music for moments of agency, when Amelia decides to fight, when she chooses to go to the hospital, when she confronts a betrayal, when she refuses to sign something dangerous. Those are the moments that deserve lift. And editing-wise, the show's strongest tool is juxtaposition. Poor vs rich. Warm vs cold. Quiet suffering vs loud power. If the director understands that, you don't need exposition, you feel the argument. Now, some people might say, okay, but isn't this all just emotional manipulation? And yes, drama is manipulation. That's literally the craft. The question is whether it manipulates you towards something meaningful. And I think this story does, because it keeps returning to dignity. Amelia's dignity is constantly being tested. By insults. By eviction threats. By money pressure. By romantic betrayal. By professional theft. And she keeps trying to hold onto it without turning into a stone. That's the hardest part. When the world treats you like you're nothing, it's tempting to become nothing just to stop hurting. Amelia refuses. That's her core heroism. But the show also risks repeating the same beat. Amelia is wronged, Amelia endures, Amelia fights. Wronged, endures, fights. And the key to keeping that engaging is variation in the nature of her victories. Sometimes she needs a small win, like outsmarting John in a subtle way. Sometimes she needs a moral win, like choosing her mother's health over pride. Sometimes she needs a relational win, like recognizing the fiancé's manipulation and choosing herself. And yes, I'm being careful with specifics because I'm not going to pretend the storyline gave us every episode's twist. But the structure is there. Let's zoom in on John for a second, because characters like him are often written lazily. What makes John compelling as an antagonist in The Office is that he's not a criminal mastermind. He's a coward with ambition. He wants the reward without the risk, the praise without the work, the authority without the accountability. He's the kind of person who takes advantage of systems that already undervalue people like Amelia. And the show can make a point here. Green Estate is the big villain, but John is the everyday villain. Green Estate might be faceless corporate greed, John is the guy who smiles while taking your lunch out of the fridge. And the fiancé is the private life version of the same pattern, entitlement. Your money is our money, but only when he's the one holding it. Our future, but he's the one cashing it out. So when Amelia finally starts connecting those dots, when she realizes the pattern of being treated as a resource, there's an emotional awakening that's more important than memory recovery. She starts learning boundaries. And I'll tell you, watching boundary building in a drama is weirdly satisfying. Not the flashy revenge. The quiet, no, the calm refusal to explain yourself. The decision to walk away. The decision to keep your money in your own hands. That stuff is catnip to anyone who's ever been guilted into overgiving. Here's a rehook for the middle stretch. What if Amelia doesn't just get found? What if she finds herself first? Because that's the version of the story that lasts longer than the plot. Now, the eviction case against Green Estate also gives the show room to explore justice as a messy process. It's not just good wins, bad loses. It's evidence, intimidation, loopholes. And if Amelia is truly putting together a case, it means she's stepping into conflict with people who have resources. That's dangerous. And it's also where the Clark world could become an accidental ally. Imagine Amelia fighting this case with nothing, while her mother, Helen, could crush Green Estate with legal force if she knew. That dramatic irony is almost cruel enough to be poetic. The storyline mentions Amelia is without memory, and yet has put together this case. That alone implies she's working in a legal adjacent environment. Or at least has access to legal support. John, being a colleague, suggests she's part of a firm or office or legal team. Which adds another layer. Amelia is working in a system that, if she were herself, she might own. And instead, she's being exploited inside it. Honestly, that's a sharp premise. And I want to talk about the title, Jalan Pulang, again, because the show keeps presenting home as both a destination and a threat. For Amelia, home could mean safety and money and answers. But it could also mean being absorbed into Helen's empire, having her choices monitored, being pressured into a life she didn't choose. And after living as a poor girl, Amelia might actually value freedom more than luxury. That's a fascinating tension. Would she even want to be an heir if it means losing herself? The father's urgency suggests he believes home is the only answer. But fathers sometimes confuse protection with possession. The drama could explore that. It might not, depending on its tone, but the potential is there. Now, I want to linger on that public humiliation moment with the father again, because it's a signature beat and it's also where the show's emotional honesty is tested. If it's staged too neatly, you feel the writer's hand. If it's messy, if there's talking over each other, if Amelia's voice cracks unexpectedly, if the father doesn't say the perfect thing, if Miss Clark's authority feels suffocating, then it becomes real. And the storyline says the father begs Miss Clark not to fire him. That's not a powerful man's line. That's a desperate man's line. So if the actor plays it with pride still flickering underneath, like he hates that he has to beg, that's when it hurts in the best way. Because you see a man swallowing his ego to keep proximity to the only thing that matters, his daughter. I also want to call out the show's use of humiliation as a repeating motif. Amelia is humiliated by her friend for being poor. The father is humiliated by his employer dynamic. Even the mother is humiliated by injury and inability to pay. Humiliation becomes the language the world uses to enforce class boundaries. And Amelia's arc is basically learning to reject humiliation as a definition. So when she bravely resists, that line in the storyline, it's not just sass. It's survival. Now, let's get into the Find My Daughter engine again, because Helen's reward creates a whole ecosystem of behavior. People will lie. People will chase false leads. People will try to profit. And that means Amelia is in danger not only from Green Estate and her immediate circle, but from strangers who might recognize her face or exploit the chaos. The show can turn that into a paranoia atmosphere, Amelia feeling watched, feeling like her life is suddenly attracting attention. And the father, trying to track her down, might be fighting through that noise, sorting signal from scam. That's a great way to keep tension high without inventing outlandish twists. And if the show leans into it visually, quick cuts of flyers, phone calls, news snippets, people whispering about the reward, it can create that sense of Amelia's anonymity being eaten away. There's also a poignant irony. Amelia is missing to the Clark world, but she's right there, living, working, struggling. She's missing only because the world failed to connect her identity to her body. That's a metaphor, honestly, for how society treats the poor. You're invisible until you're useful. Okay, small humorous aside before I get too bleak, the amount of people in dramas who think they can casually steal someone's savings, like it's a library book, is always wild to me. Oh, you were saving for school? Cute. I'll just take that. Sir, do you hear yourself? But then again, people do it. That's the least funny part. Now, one thing I want to praise is how the storyline positions Amelia as someone who doesn't just suffer, she creates. She knits. That matters. The act of making scarves is an act of agency. It's also an act of care. And it makes the story softer in texture. Without that, everything would be too hard-edged. And Christmas as a setting for that early arc gives the show a bittersweet sheen. Holiday music in the background while someone insults you is a special kind of cruelty. It's like the universe is mocking you with cheerfulness. And when the good person buys all her scarves, it's like the universe blinking and saying, okay, not everyone is like that. But then the landlord comes back with illegal rent hikes, and the universe goes, just kidding. The tonal whiplash is intentional. It keeps you emotionally off balance the way poverty keeps you off balance. Now, let's talk about the mother's injury and hospitalization decision again, because that's where Amelia's character shows something I think is the true core of the story: devotion. Amelia is willing to sacrifice her own future for her mother's present. That's love. It's also a tragedy that she has to. And her mother's refusal is also love. It's love in the form of, I will not let you ruin yourself for me. And when she finally agrees to go to the hospital, it's a surrender that feels like defeat and relief at once. Defeat, because she couldn't protect her child from having to make that offer. Relief, because pain is exhausting and she's allowed to stop pretending she's okay. The best performances in dramas like this are the small ones. A mother trying to sit up without wincing, failing, then smiling anyway so her daughter won't panic. A daughter turning away for a second so she can cry silently, then turning back with a steady voice. That's the stuff that feels real. And if you're a newcomer, here's why you should care about these small scenes, because they make the later big scenes matter. If you don't believe the mother-daughter bond, then the wealth reveal is just fireworks. But if you do believe it, then the idea of Amelia being taken home becomes complicated. Because what about the mother who raised her in this life? What happens to her when Amelia's identity shifts? And I'm going to be very honest, one of my biggest fears with this kind of storyline is that the poor mother figure becomes disposable once the rich family enters. Like, thanks for raising her, bye. If the show does that, I will be annoyed. Deeply. Because it would undermine the emotional truth it spent so long building. The mother deserves narrative respect. Even if the plot pulls Amelia into the Clark world, the story should honor that the person who held her in the dark was not the person with $50 million. It was the woman in the small room. So yeah, I'm watching that closely. Here's another rehook: when the father brings Amelia back toward the Clark world, is it going to feel like rescue, or like kidnapping to someone who doesn't remember being theirs? That's a terrifying emotional question, and it's exactly the kind of moral friction that makes melodrama feel like more than melodrama. Now, I want to get into the tone of confrontation scenes, because the storyline hints at multiple points where Amelia is humiliated, and then dares to resist. Those scenes are the show's adrenaline shots. They are also where dialogue writing matters. If the insults are too over the top, they become cartoonish. If they are quiet, pointed, socially plausible, they cut deeper. The most painful insults are the ones said with a smile. And Amelia's best comebacks shouldn't sound like Twitter. They should sound like someone who has held too much in and finally lets one truth slip out. Not polished. Honest. The father's protective scenes also have to avoid being too neat. Protection is messy. Sometimes you say the wrong thing. Sometimes you embarrass the person you're trying to defend. Sometimes your arrival makes it worse before it makes it better. If the show embraces that mess, the scene becomes memorable. Now, about Miss Clark, Helen's presence in scenes with the father creates a dynamic that's almost more interesting than Helen with anyone else, because the father likely knows her in a way the public doesn't. If he's begging not to be fired, he's seen her coldness up close. He's felt her authority. He might resent her. He might fear her. He might also respect her competence. It's complicated. And I love complicated. There's also an implied social class tension between them. He's the one pleading. She's the one deciding. That imbalance becomes a microcosm of the show's wider theme: who gets to decide what happens to you? And that's where the father's love becomes radical. Because even while he's under her power, he prioritizes his daughter. He's basically saying, fire me if you want, but don't touch her. That's the kind of loyalty that makes you believe in people again, even if it's messy. Now, let's talk about the title, Sang Pewaris, the heir. In stories, being an heir often means inheriting wealth. But emotionally, Amelia is inheriting something else too: the consequences of her family's choices. She's inheriting absence. She's inheriting a legacy she didn't consent to. She's inheriting enemies who will appear the moment her name becomes valuable. And the show is setting up that the moment Amelia is identified, everything changes. Not just her resources, her risks. People like John will shift strategies. A fiancé will shift tone. Green Estate might panic if they realize they've been abusing the daughter of a legal titan. The entire social field around Amelia will reshape itself overnight. That's exciting storytelling because it forces characters to reveal who they really are when the power dynamics flip. And I'm going to say something: I don't always enjoy power flip revenge arcs. Sometimes they are too easy. The poor girl becomes rich and suddenly everyone bows and apologizes and she gets to humiliate them back. That can be cathartic, but it can also be hollow if the show treats it like the ultimate win. Because the real win isn't humiliating your enemies. The real win is not becoming like them. So what I want from Amelia, what I'm hoping the story gives her, is a different kind of victory. Not cruelty. Clarity. The ability to protect herself and her mother without losing her softness. Now, let's circle back to that good person who bought her scarves, because I actually think that moment is more than a sweet break. It's a thematic seed. It shows that kindness exists outside family and outside wealth. It suggests that the world is not divided strictly into villains and heroes. There are strangers who will help without agenda. And that's important because later, when the reward money starts attracting opportunists, the show needs to preserve the idea that not all strangers are predators. Otherwise the world becomes too cynical and the drama becomes heavy. And I think Jalan Pulang Sang Pewaris, in its best moments, isn't cynical. It's angry, yes. It's hurt, yes. But it's still romantic about human decency. Okay, I want to zoom in on one more cinematic mini-scene, because this is the kind of drama that lives in a few images that stick with you. Imagine Amelia coming home after a brutal day. Maybe she's been insulted, maybe John pressured her, maybe the fiancé sweet-talked her while stealing inches of her autonomy. She opens the door quietly because her mother is resting. The room is dim. The only sound is the refrigerator hum and the faint city noise through a cheap window. She puts down her bag. Her hands tremble for a second as she counts the cash she has left. Not much. She squeezes her eyes shut, and you can see she's trying to will herself not to panic. Then she hears her mother shift in bed and she instantly changes her face, wipes the fear off like it's something you can physically remove. She walks in with a smile that's just a little too bright. "How are you feeling?" she asks, voice gentle. Her mother says, "I'm fine." They both know it's a lie. But it's a lie they tell each other as love. And the camera just stays there, long enough for you to feel how fragile their little world is. That's the heart of the show. Now, when the father enters that world, it's not just a reunion. It's an invasion of a delicate ecosystem. And even if it's a loving invasion, it's still disruptive. Amelia's mother might feel threatened, like she's about to lose her daughter to a richer world. Amelia might feel confused, like she's being claimed by strangers. The father might feel guilt, like he doesn't deserve to step into this room. Helen might feel entitlement, like she's owed her child back. And if the show leans into those messy emotions, it becomes genuinely compelling. Here's the next curiosity spike. What if Amelia's strongest loyalty isn't to the Clark name, but to the life she built without it? Because that would complicate everything in the best way. Now, I've been praising a lot. But let me sharpen one critique that I think matters for critics especially. The story risks treating institutions like simple villains. Green Estate is framed as bad, the landlord as greedy, the clinic as risky, the office colleague as opportunistic, the fiancé as a scammer. That's a lot of antagonism concentrated around one protagonist. It can start to feel like the universe is dogpiling her rather than the story exploring a few conflicts deeply. The way to fix that, if the show wants to feel more mature, is to give at least one institutional antagonist a human face with nuance. Maybe someone at Green Estate who's not evil but complicit. Maybe someone in the clinic who's doing their job but uneasy. Maybe a co-worker who's torn between loyalty to John and sympathy for Amelia. Those shades make the world feel real. But even if it doesn't fully do that, the show still works as a heightened melodrama because the emotions are clear and the stakes are intimate. And yes, I'm aware I'm asking for nuance in a story that is very proudly dramatic. That's on me. I'm the one who wants my cake and wants it to also be a dissertation. Now, the father's race to New York is the kind of plot engine that thrives on near misses. He's always one step behind. He arrives at a location and she's gone. He asks a question and gets half an answer. And each near miss increases the ache. Because the audience knows what the characters don't, that the reunion is coming, but the delay is a form of suffering. And the show can make those near misses feel meaningful by attaching them to emotion, not just logistics. Like, the father sees a scarf she knitted. Or he hears someone describe her kindness. He starts building a picture of who she became without them. And that realization can break him in a way that simple guilt speeches never could. Because it's not just, I lost my daughter. It's, my daughter grew up without me, and she's good anyway. That's devastating. Now, I also want to talk about class performance, how characters perform their class through speech and behavior. Amelia's friend humiliating her at Christmas is performing superiority. John taking credit is performing competence. The fiancé performing love is performing trustworthiness. Helen performs control. The father performs loyalty. And Amelia, the whole time, performs strength. The show is basically a parade of performances. Which is why the moments when someone's mask slips are the most exciting. So when Amelia cracks, when she almost cries, when she almost screams, when she almost gives up, you feel it. And when she doesn't crack, you feel that too. One more thing I appreciated, the story doesn't make Amelia's poverty aesthetic. It's not like she's poor in a cute way, with perfect hair and a tidy little struggle. Her poverty is stress. It's time pressure. It's physical fatigue. It's fear. And the scarf knitting is one of the few places where beauty exists. That contrast is what makes the scarf scenes pop. Now, the storyline also hints that Amelia is involved in a case and a trial and there's a legal firm dynamic. That suggests the show enjoys courtroom-adjacent drama. And if it goes there, the best thing it can do is let Amelia's voice be heard in a formal setting. Because nothing is more cathartic than a person who's been dismissed finally being listened to in a room that matters. But again, I don't want the show to turn into pure power fantasy. The best courtroom moments aren't the mic drop speeches, they are the moments where someone tells the truth plainly and the room can't ignore it. Okay, let me check in with you again, because if you're still here, you're probably emotionally attached like I am. Which betrayal hit you harder, John at work or the fiancé at home? Because for me, the fiancé betrayal has more venom. Work betrayal is expected. Love betrayal is personal. It makes you feel stupid for hoping. And I hate that feeling. And Amelia is dealing with both while also dealing with eviction and a sick mother and a risky clinical trial. Like, girl. Please. Somebody give her a nap and a locked door. Now, the father's protective presence, once it enters, can shift the tone from Amelia alone against the world to Amelia with a shield. But the shield comes with strings: Miss Clark's power, Team Jersey's involvement, the Clark family politics. And that's where the show can create a new kind of conflict, internal family conflict. Not just find her, but what do we do with her now? Helen may want to bring Amelia into the firm world, the legacy world. The father may want to keep her safe and maybe keep her away from Helen's coldness. Amelia may want to protect her mother first. Those competing desires can create a tense triangle. And I know some people will watch this for the romance angle too, fiancé drama, potential new love interests, whatever the show offers. But personally, the romance I care about most here is the love between Amelia and her mother, and the complicated love between Amelia and her father. Those relationships are the spine. The fiancé is a test. The family is the story. Now, there's another layer. Amelia's amnesia means she doesn't have the emotional history that would normally guide her reactions. So when her father appears, she might not feel what he feels. He might cry and she might stand there confused. And that is one of the most heartbreaking things a drama can do, make a reunion emotionally uneven. One person is home. The other person is meeting a stranger. If the show plays that honestly, it could be brutal in the best way. And Helen's reaction could be even more complicated. Helen might expect gratitude or instant bonding. Amelia might not give it. Amelia might be cautious. Or worse, Amelia might be polite. And polite distance hurts more than anger because you can't argue with it. You can't fix it with a speech. You have to earn closeness. Here's a rehook that I think is the emotional knife waiting to twist. What if Amelia, once she learns who she is angrier than everyone expects? Because audiences often assume the lost heiress will be relieved. But what if she's furious? Furious that she suffered for no reason. Furious that her mother was hurt while the Clarks had money. Furious that she was almost pushed into a risky trial. Furious that the world humiliated her while her identity sat locked away like a key nobody bothered to use. Anger would be earned. And it would be interesting. Especially if Amelia's anger is controlled and strategic rather than explosive. Now, about humor, this show doesn't feel like a comedy, obviously, but the best dramas allow tiny moments of levity so your heart doesn't seize up. Amelia and her mother could share a dry joke about hospital food. Amelia could roll her eyes at John's fake professionalism. The father could have one awkward dad moment where he tries to be normal and fails. Those little breaks make the heavy moments hit harder because they remind you these characters are people, not suffering machines. And I'll say this, if the show ever has Amelia laugh, really laugh, after so many episodes of strain, that would be one of the most powerful moments. Because laughter after survival isn't light. It's sacred. Now, let's talk about the show's moral universe. Who does it punish? Who does it reward? From the storyline, it seems to reward persistence and punish entitlement. But it also punishes goodness by putting it in danger. That's a classic melodrama pattern, make the good person suffer so their goodness feels meaningful. But it's a risky pattern because viewers can burn out. The show has to give micro-catharsis along the way. Like the stranger buying all the scarves, that's micro-catharsis. Amelia getting her mother to the hospital, painful, but also a win. Amelia building the eviction case, agency. The father finding a trace, hope. Those are the little lights in the tunnel. And the biggest light, eventually, will be Amelia reclaiming her identity. But again, I want that to be complicated. I don't want it to be a magic wand. Also, the Iron Lady of Law title suggests Helen is respected and feared. The show can use that to explore how women in power are often forced into coldness to survive. That's not an excuse for neglect, but it is context. And context is where good drama lives. Now, one thing that's easy to miss, the storyline says Helen's law firm is the biggest in the world. That implies she's not just rich, she's influential. Which means Amelia's return isn't just family news. It's public interest. its reputation, its headlines. That adds a whole new dimension of pressure. Amelia, who has been living quietly, could suddenly be thrust into visibility. And visibility can be violent. So Amelia's road home might involve learning how to exist under a spotlight without losing herself. That's an entire arc by itself. And the father, who is used to being under Helen's authority, might be terrified of that spotlight. He might want to hide Amelia even as Helen wants to showcase her return as proof of control and victory. Again, I'm not inventing exact scenes, but the tension is baked in. Now, I want to bring the Green Estate conflict back into focus as the likely catalyst for public confrontation. Because legal battles have a way of drawing attention. If Amelia's case gains traction, it could intersect with Helen's world. Suddenly, Amelia's legal instincts become recognizable. Suddenly, someone might connect dots. Suddenly, her identity becomes less missing girl, and more the kind of mind that could only come from that lineage. That's a satisfying narrative mechanism if the show uses it. Amelia is found not just by face recognition, but by the shape of her thinking. And that would be poetic. Because it would mean Amelia's true identity is not her wealth. It's her sense of justice. Here's another thing that made me unexpectedly emotional: Amelia choosing to use her school funds for her mother's care. Education is often framed as the escape route. She's about to sacrifice it. And the show is basically asking, how many people have had to do that in real life? How many dreams got rerouted by family emergencies? That hit me because it's one of those truths dramas can portray without preaching. You just watch it happen and you feel the unfairness. And the fact that Amelia promises to find her own tuition later is both inspiring and heartbreaking. Because you can hear the optimism, and you can also hear the desperation. It's a promise made in a moment where she needs to believe in herself or she will collapse. Now, about the father's search, the storyline says he found a trace in New York and discovered she's involved in risky trials and the eviction case. That implies he's investigating. Which means he's probably seeing pieces of her life without her noticing. And that's another storytelling opportunity, the father witnessing her struggle from a distance. Seeing her carry groceries. Seeing her argue with a landlord. Seeing her comfort her mother. Watching his daughter be brave without him. That would destroy any parent. If the show includes moments like that, it can make the eventual reunion feel earned. Because the father won't just be reunited with his daughter, he'll be reunited with the person she became. He'll have to accept that he missed her becoming that person. And if he's pleading with Helen not to fire him, it also suggests he's trapped in a dynamic where he can't just act freely. He might have to ask permission to pursue his own child. That's humiliating. And again, that mirrors Amelia's powerlessness in her poor life. The show is creating symmetry between father and daughter, which strengthens the emotional resonance. Now, I'm going to get a little craft nerdy for a second, because I think critics will appreciate it. The story is structured around layered antagonists. Green Estate is systemic antagonism. The landlord is proximate antagonism. John is interpersonal antagonism in professional life. The fiancé is interpersonal antagonism in romantic life. The clinical trial is situational antagonism, desperation. Helen's wealth is a paradoxical antagonism, help that can't reach her. And amnesia is internal antagonism, identity barrier. That's a lot, but it's cohesive because it all points to one theme: when you don't have power, everyone else's choices become your reality. Okay, but what about Amelia's own flaws? Because she can't just be a saint or she becomes boring. From the storyline, her biggest flaw is over-responsibility. She tries to carry everything. That can turn into stubbornness. It can turn into secrecy. It can push away allies. And the show can use that to create conflict that isn't villain-driven. Like Amelia refusing help until it's too late. Amelia hiding her financial stress from her mother. Amelia not telling someone about the fiancé's manipulation because she's ashamed. Those are believable. And they also make her growth meaningful. Growth isn't become rich. Growth is learn you deserve support. Here's a rehook that I think keeps the emotional tension tight. When Amelia finally has access to wealth and protection, will she even know how to accept it, or will she sabotage it because struggle is all she trusts? That's real. People who've lived in chaos sometimes feel uncomfortable in calm. Calm feels like the moment before disaster. So they create disaster to feel in control. If the show touches that psychology, it becomes very human. Now, I want to address the loved, mixed, disliked stance input you gave. Since you didn't specify one, I'm going to be transparent about where I'm landing as I go. I'm leaning loved with some reservations. I'm invested. I care. I'm irritated in the way you get irritated when you care. The show is pushing emotional buttons that are hard to fake. But I'm also watching for whether it respects its own themes. If it turns into pure revenge fantasy, it might lose me. If it discards the poor mother, it will lose me. If it makes Helen a one-note villain or a one-note savior, it will flatten something that could be complex. If it makes Amelia endlessly gullible just to keep the plot moving, it will frustrate me. Still, the bones are strong. Now, there's another moment I want to highlight, the stranger buying Amelia's scarves. That moment also sets up a possible motif of witnesses. People who see Amelia's value before her family does. And that's important, because it suggests that even without blood ties, Amelia can be loved. She can be valued. She can have community. And that matters because found family is often more emotionally nourishing than inherited family. So when she returns to the Clark world, it shouldn't erase the people who helped her survive. The show can make a point about loyalty, who was there when she had nothing. And then there's the Green Estate case, which likely affects more than just Amelia's family. Illegal evictions usually impact entire communities. If Amelia becomes involved, her fight becomes bigger than her own story. That's where she shifts from victim to advocate. And that's where the heiress reveal becomes morally interesting. Will she use her regained privilege to protect others, or only herself? And I'm hoping the show goes for the former, because that's how you make the heiress trope feel meaningful rather than indulgent. Now, let me get back to the father and Miss Clark dynamic, because the storyline's phrasing, him pleading not to be fired, implies a confrontation. And confrontations in this show are often about dignity. So imagine the father standing in Helen's office, being told he's out, being dismissed like a tool that broke. And he swallows his pride and says, "Please." That's a man who has already lost too much to lose his job too, not because he loves the job, but because the job is proximity to the search, proximity to the power, proximity to his daughter. Helen might see his plea as weakness. The audience sees it as devotion. And if Helen has any humanity, that plea will hit her. Even if she doesn't show it. And that's another reason Helen can be compelling, a woman who doesn't show emotion, but is still moved by it. The tiniest flicker on her face becomes a plot event. That's good acting territory. Now, I want to talk about how the show treats humiliation scenes, because those can easily become repetitive. The key is escalation and variation. The first humiliation is social, friend mocking Amelia. The second is economic, landlord threatening eviction. The third is professional, John taking credit. The fourth is intimate, fiancé targeting savings. The fifth is institutional, clinic risk. Each humiliation attacks a different part of identity, social worth, security, competence, trust, bodily autonomy. That's why it doesn't feel like the same scene repeated, even if the emotional beat is similar. It's also why the show feels intense. It's dismantling Amelia piece by piece, and watching her rebuild herself in real time. Now, if you're still with me, here's the next thing that kept me on edge. When the father closes in on Amelia, how does he prove who he is to someone with no memory? Because love isn't a fingerprint scanner. He can't just say, "I'm your dad," and expect her nervous system to agree. He might bring proof. Documents. Photos. But those are facts, not feelings. And Amelia might accept the facts while still feeling nothing. That's painful. And for Helen, it's even more complicated because Helen's love language might be provision. She might try to overwhelm Amelia with resources as proof of care. But Amelia has been living on dignity, not luxury. So what if luxury feels like a bribe? That tension could be incredible. Now, since this is a long-form review script, I also want to address the audience experience, why this kind of drama is so bingeable. It's because it runs on moral outrage. You keep watching because you want justice. You want the landlord punished. You want John exposed. You want the fiancé embarrassed. You want Green Estate held accountable. And you want Amelia safe. Outrage is a powerful fuel. But it has to be paid off. The show can't keep teasing justice without delivering some. It needs to let Amelia win battles along the way. And the storyline hints at those battles getting more exciting, which suggests there are confrontations and turning points. The father's protective arrival is one. The legal case building is another. The reward hunt is another. The Team Jersey contact suggests escalation. So the show is building toward a phase where the power dynamics start flipping. And that's when viewers start cheering out loud. But again, I want the flipping to be emotionally honest. Because when you've been powerless, gaining power can be disorienting. Amelia might not immediately know how to use it responsibly. She might lash out. She might overcorrect. That would be human. Now, let's talk about the Jersey detail again. The fact that someone immediately contacts Team Jersey suggests there's a protocol in place for crises. Rich people crisis protocols are fascinating because they reveal what they fear. They fear scandal. They fear loss of control. They fear unpredictability. So they build teams to handle it. Amelia's world has no team. It has her. And maybe her mother. That's it. So bringing Team Jersey into Amelia's world is like dropping a military unit into a street market. It changes the temperature instantly. Everyone stands straighter. People stop talking. The air gets tense. That's great dramatic energy. And if the show uses it well, it can also critique that kind of power, the way resources show up fast when the rich are involved, and slowly when the poor are suffering. Now, I want to talk about one of the more subtle themes, memory as privilege. Amelia's amnesia isn't just personal tragedy, it's loss of access. Your memories contain your social map. They tell you who to trust, where to go, what you're allowed to ask for. Without memory, Amelia is socially naked. She has to build everything from scratch. That's why she gets exploited. So when the story eventually restores her memory, or even if it only restores her identity through external confirmation, it's not just she remembers. It's she regains access. Access to protection, to resources, to truth. And the show can make that moment powerful by framing it not as fireworks, but as quiet horror, Amelia realizing how much she endured unnecessarily. That realization could break her more than the suffering itself, because suffering while hopeful is one thing. Suffering while realizing it was avoidable is another. Here's a rehook that's been haunting me. What if the hardest part isn't surviving as poor Amelia, but forgiving as Amelia Clark? Because forgiveness is expensive. And Amelia has been paying in pain. Now, I'll keep pushing forward with the arc as presented. The father rushing to find her implies he's going to intersect with the clinical trial and eviction case. So we're likely heading into a stretch where multiple conflicts converge in a short time window. Those are the best episodes in dramas like this, because everything you've been waiting for starts to happen at once. Amelia's case against Green Estate might reach a turning point, maybe evidence is presented, maybe a confrontation happens, maybe John tries to sabotage it. The eviction pressure might peak, maybe a forced move is threatened. The mother's health might worsen, increasing urgency. The fiancé might push harder for the money as he senses Amelia slipping away. The father might finally locate Amelia physically. And Helen's reward might bring more people into the hunt. Even without precise details, that convergence is the story's promise. And in that convergence, Amelia's character is tested. Does she keep choosing her mother over herself? Does she keep trusting the fiancé? Does she confront John? Does she compromise on the clinical trial? Does she accept help? And that's where the story stops being about circumstance and becomes about choice. Now, one of the most satisfying possible beats, again, not inventing specifics, just describing the kind of beat the story is aiming at, is when Amelia uses her legal mind to protect herself. Imagine John trying to corner her for her savings, and Amelia calmly citing policy, citing rules, citing consequences. Not yelling. Just naming reality. That's power. Or imagine the fiancé trying to get her to hand over wedding savings and Amelia asking one sharp question he can't answer. That's how you dismantle a manipulator. You don't scream. You ask a question they can't survive. And those moments are where acting matters. The lead actress has to play the shift from fear to clarity. A small lift of the chin. A steadier gaze. A voice that stops apologizing. That's the kind of performance detail that makes viewers cheer without realizing they're cheering for something as quiet as self-respect. Now, let me be slightly petty for a second, because it's YouTube, we're allowed one petty moment. John wanting to take credit for Amelia's case is the kind of behavior that makes me want to teleport into the screen and delete his font privileges. Like, no. You don't get to use Times New Roman to steal someone's labor. Absolutely not. Okay. Back to being serious. There's also the question of whether Amelia's mother knows anything about Amelia's past. The storyline doesn't say, so I'm not going to claim she does. But if she doesn't, then the mother's world is about to be shattered too. The mother might feel like she's losing her daughter to a story she can't participate in. That's heartbreaking. And again, if the show treats her as disposable, it loses a lot of its emotional truth. So I'm hoping the show allows the mother to remain central even as the Clark world enters. Maybe the Clarks help her. Maybe there's tension. Maybe Helen sees her as a barrier. Maybe Amelia refuses to leave without her. That would be consistent with Amelia's devotion. And that could also be a beautiful reversal. The rich family has to acknowledge the poor mother not as a servant, not as a footnote, but as someone who raised their child in their absence. Now, as for Helen's Iron Lady image, I'm watching to see if the show gives her a moral arc too. Is she capable of changing? Or is she a fixed force? Fixed forces can be fun in melodramas, but change is what makes characters linger in your mind. And Helen changing wouldn't have to mean she becomes warm and cuddly. It could mean she learns humility. It could mean she learns to listen. It could mean she stops using money as her only expression of love. And that would make the eventual homecoming feel like healing, not just retrieval. Now, I want to talk about the idea of home one more time, because it's the emotional thesis. Home is not necessarily where you came from. It's where you are protected. Amelia's current home is poor but loving. The Clark home is rich but unknown. The road home is not just geography, it's a decision about what kind of life she wants. And the tragedy is that Amelia doesn't get to make that decision in peace. She has to make it while being chased, exploited, threatened, and pressured. That's not a choice. That's a corner. Here's another rehook to keep the stakes sharp. When Amelia is finally offered safety, will it come with a price she refuses to pay? Because safety offered by powerful people often has conditions. Now, the storyline ends with conflict gets more exciting. Watch how father protects his daughter, which suggests the father's protective role becomes active, not just emotional. And I can imagine the father stepping into conflict with Green Estate or with the people exploiting Amelia. Not as a superhero, but as a father who's done being polite. And if the show gives him a confrontation where he has to choose between his job under Helen and his daughter's safety, that's a strong dramatic moment. Because it forces him to reveal what he values more, security under power, or truth and family. And if Helen witnesses that choice, it could affect her too. It could challenge her worldview. It could show her that love isn't measured in millions. Now, I'm going to keep going because there's still a lot of emotional territory to unpack, and this is the kind of drama that invites you to live inside it. Amelia's storyline is essentially a sequence of thresholds: the threshold of humiliation, the threshold of resistance, the threshold of sacrifice, the threshold of betrayal, the threshold of danger, the threshold of being found. And each threshold changes her. I keep thinking about that Christmas scarf scene as the origin point. A girl making warmth for others, being mocked for it, then being shown kindness, then being threatened again. That's the cycle. And the fact that she keeps making warmth anyway is the thesis. She refuses to become cold even while the world is cold to her. That's why I'm emotionally attached. Because it's not just plot. It's a character stance. Now, if the show's final stretch eventually brings Amelia into the Clark world, the most important thing it can do is preserve her stance. Let her keep her moral clarity. Let her keep her tenderness. Let her become powerful without becoming cruel. But we're not there yet in the story flow I'm reliving with you. Right now, we're still in that feverish middle where everything is tightening, where every person around Amelia wants something, and the father is closing in with protection that might arrive at the last possible second, and Amelia is still walking forward into danger because she doesn't have the luxury to stop. She can't pause life. She can only keep moving, one step, one breath, one decision at a time, and the next decision she makes, whether it's about the clinical trial, the case, the fiancé, the rent, or her mother, feels like it could tip the whole fragile structure one way or the other, and the camera lingers just long enough on her face for you to realize she knows that too.